So here we are, another day this week where we seem to have almost hourly revelations about Hillary Clinton's email server. And we've been told, of course, that many of these emails were now deleted by a program, a specialized program that would make it impossible to recover them. In other words, it would make it very difficult for anyone, even a computer expert, to go back in and find out what these things happen to actually say. That would tell you, Trey Gowdy summed it up pretty well on a Fox newscast the other day when he said that would tell you that perhaps there were more things in those emails than just news about Hillary Clinton's grandchildren or about her yoga exercises, things that she did not want anybody to see. In other words, they were trying to cover up the activities of the hoovering of all that cash by the Clinton Foundation. Here's something I've got to share with you this morning because I think it will help clarify this story in the minds of a lot of people. And mainstream media is, I don't think, trying to do not making much of any effort here in order to do this. But this is what I'd like to share with you. This comes from ArkansasOnline.com. That is affiliated with one of the largest newspapers in her husband's home state of Arkansas. And the writer of this piece says, we've got to mention that there are actually two foundations. Did you know that? Now, this is what I think is going to be important about all of this. Listen carefully to this distinction. There's a big difference between the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Family Foundation. Cheers to the Clinton Family Foundation, the writer says, which found its way to the front page of your statewide newspaper Sunday. Once again, the writer says, that outfit has given millions of dollars to benefit who knows how many people over the years. Again, that is the Clinton Family Foundation. But it turns out there are two foundations. Media keeps saying, oh, you hear it all the time, in fact, from all of Hillary Clinton's sycophants on TV. You know, the spin people who come out and say, well, the foundation has done wonders to help people around the world clean water and sanitation and feeding them. Clinton Family Foundation is what they're talking about. They're trying to deflect attention from a second entity, which most of us, I did not know this myself, most of us did not know existed, because there's just been very little coverage of the fact that there are two. The writer says, then there's something called the Clinton Foundation, without the family part in the title. And the Washington Post reported last week that more than half of the big donors to that outfit, those who have given $1 million or more, are corporations or foreign groups or governments. Now, as I was reading through this, I recollected another story I read this morning. Hillary Clinton is going around the country telling everybody that Donald Trump is in the hip pocket of the Russians, Vladimir Putin, and that's a very, very dangerous relationship. And if he's elected president, he'll just simply wave the white flag. The Russians will come in, they'll take over, and they'll conquer the good old USA in an easy, easy fashion. However, in neighboring Ukraine, which of course is at loggerheads with the Russians, and we are hearing Ukraine portrayed as being this tiny country at the mercy of Vladimir Putin, at least for the moment, because he hasn't gone in there and mopped up yet. We keep hearing that the Ukrainians just would like to, coexist. But many of the people in the Ukrainian government are nothing but kleptocrats. That is, they're thieves who are masquerading as politicians. In other words, they're no different than a lot of the other people who are running governments in many of the old Soviet republics. And many of them are mobsters. Now, you've probably heard about the Russian Mafia and its cutthroat approach to doing business. It's because a lot of these people grew up in an environment where they were just deprived of everything, and it became survival of the fittest. So they decided they had to get by in life by stacking up as much as they could from themselves and taking from other people and doing whatever you could, including cutting throats, in order to hold on to what you had. Well, Ukraine has its own version of the mafia, because in all of these former Russian republics, these things have, they've arisen from the ashes. People who were deprived, people who have no morals, people who feel that they've got to do these things in order to survive, and it's the only way that they know. It's how they learned as they were growing up, as they were fighting for scraps of garbage. And eventually some managed to get rid of all of the others, and then they got all of the marbles, if you will, or all of the scraps. And now they've got all of the power. But it's all through their ruthless behavior. One of these fellows from Ukraine, as it turns out, has given somewhere between $20,000 and $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. Now, why would a mobster from Ukraine give the Clintons that kind of money? Does he support their efforts? Or would he perhaps be looking for some quid pro quo, that is, a favor in return? And when would he be looking for that favor in return? And maybe that's why Hillary Clinton is so hostile to the Russians, who happen to be Ukraine's traditional enemy. I would hope she wouldn't start World War III over a border war between those two countries. But if she's elected president, well, look at it this way historically. 1960. John Kennedy was in a fight for his life when he was running for president of the United States against the then sitting vice president, Richard M. Nixon. After the votes were finally tallied on election night, Kennedy had won nationwide. The margin of victory just across the country in all, well, then 50 states, was just, this is the popular vote, but was just 176,000 votes cast. The difference between Kennedy and Nixon. Now, you average that, as I say, across all 50 states, and you see it was mightily close in many of those states where they had to have, it was like extracting teeth to get the popular vote, but as well, they had to get enough of that in all of these states just to squeak by so they could get the Electoral College vote and put Kennedy into office. How was that accomplished? In West Virginia, a state that looked like it was going to go to Richard Nixon, at the time, Democrats were somewhat supportive of the coal industry, unlike today where they don't support it at all. The coal miners' union, United Mine Workers, was a powerful union. It was also in cahoots with the American Mafia. So the Mafia went in and twisted a few arms and told some of the union folks, you've got to get the vote out for John Kennedy. In Chicago, the dead rose up and voted, sometimes multiple times. And that allowed Illinois to go to Kennedy. And it was those types of actions in various places around the country where the Mafia leveraged its relationships with labor unions and the like, that it was able to deliver the election to John Kennedy. Now, after that, did the Mafia say, we just like Kennedy's looks, that's why we did it, so we decided, he's such a handsome fellow, we decided to do it because we need a handsome president? Or did the Mafia expect that after Kennedy was president, that no one would look over its shoulders while it did its dirty work? After being elected, President Kennedy then named his brother, Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General. And the Attorney General's office began snooping around into the business of the Mafia and putting away mobsters behind bars. Now you think about that. The Mafia was very, very, very supporting, or at least it helped put John Kennedy over the top. Suddenly he's president, and the thanks they get, he comes after them. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the sense that I try to stick all of these things, together and say, well, this must be why this happened. But I think that we do know that if Kennedy had been targeted by anyone, he had a handful of enemies, but among those enemies happened to be the Mafia. And the Mafia felt it had good reason because it felt John Kennedy had double-crossed it. John Kennedy ended up dead. That's because he didn't do the quid pro quo. Now, before all of you lefties out there think that I'm recommending something and you start calling for my head and turning me into the Secret Service, I'm just telling you, you don't play with fire. And if your foundation has collected tens of millions of dollars from gangsters and dictators and Muslim sheikhs who go around lopping off heads, then that's why Hillary Clinton would like to bring perhaps millions of Islamic refugees into this country. In other words, they bought the access, they bought the influence, and they bought the open door so they can now flood our country with their people and eventually perhaps overturn our culture and overturn perhaps the last country standing in the world that can prevent them from a worldwide takeover. Now, could this really happen? I don't know, maybe never. But they're thinking that way. They're thinking that this is an opportunity and that they purchased that opportunity through Mrs. Clinton. This is why so many of these emails went walking and haven't been recovered. Do you now understand how all of this is going to play out? When she is elected in November, she takes the oath of office on January 20th, 2017, and then all of her actions from that point on are going to be ordered by many of these nefarious people who gave Mrs. Clinton and her husband all of this cash, tens of millions of dollars in cash. And then what type of a country are we going to have? The media is doubling down. Yesterday she spoke in Reno, Nevada, and she gave a speech about what a terrible racist Donald Trump was. This was essentially just telling all of her associates, fellow travelers in media, that it's time to beat up on Trump now about this. In other words, they could have said this for months, and they have, but now that Hillary came out and did her screech owl voice yesterday in Reno for about half an hour, now the media feels, okay, we've gotten our marching orders. Now we're going to do our best. We're going to double down or triple down on claiming Trump's a racist in order to get him out of the way. I just, the whole system is so rotten and so corrupt. The British politician Nigel Farage, who was campaigning for Trump a couple of days ago in Mississippi, made an appearance on the Cavuto program, which is currently being hosted by Stuart Varney while Cavuto is recovering from some cancer treatment. But this is talk about British wit. This is Mr. Farage speaking with Varney yesterday.
Now, President Obama went to Britain before the Brexit vote, and he said, you got to stay. I understand that that was very resented by British people who didn't like an American politician telling them how to vote. Well, couldn't you say the same thing about you? You come to America and you've told American voters, don't vote for Hillary Clinton. I mean, you could say there's a parallel there, and that what you said last night could be resented in some quarters in America.
Well, Obama said we should vote Remain. Obama said that terrible things would happen to us if we didn't vote Remain. And he told us that if we voted to leave, that basically America would just drop us and our relationship with the United States of America. I didn't tell anyone how to vote. I mean, I wouldn't dare do such a thing. I did suggest, though, that if I was an American citizen, I wouldn't vote for Hillary, because nothing is going to change if that woman wins. She represents that big corporate media club, you know, that have had their own way over the last 20 or 30 years, that have led us into an endless series of wars and led us into a world where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So I personally wouldn't vote for Hillary, but no, I'm not telling people how they should vote.
Would you did not directly endorse Donald Trump last night. Why not?
Because I criticised Obama for telling us how we should vote, and I'm not going to fall into that same trap myself. But I don't think it's very difficult to read between the lines of what I was saying last night.
That is what I call wit. It's not difficult to read between the lines of what I was saying, giving his recommendation on this. There are people all over the world who are warning us about how difficult a pickle we're in and how dangerous electing Hillary Clinton president would be. Maybe it's time we started to listen. We've got more coming up on this subject. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com at 8:20. It's 49. What truly frightens me is that if Mrs. Clinton is elected president, we could end up, all of America could end up like Detroit, Michigan. We could all be living in Mad Max times, which is why I've been recommending all week long that you need to drop by the Last Stand Survival Shop in Jerome. Located at 18 Butte Drive, that's just up Route 93 at Route 25. If you're heading out of Twin Falls and drive about 10 miles up the highway, you get to the intersection, you hang a right turn onto Route 25, and then there's a very quick left turn onto Butte Drive, and you'll find Last Stand Survival Shop, which is also on Facebook. You can see a great many things there. And they are currently working with gunsmiths who can produce firearms for you that will meet your specific needs. You know, you've got to have that right grip, and you've got to have something that's the right weight. You've got to have something that won't knock you over when you're actually firing it. They can work with you on that, and also they'd like to remind you, too, as well, that some days you're going to have to be prepared for anything. What would you put into a bug-out bag? That, again, is something that would be customized. What would you need if you had to get away for a few days or up to a few months and find a place to take shelter until the storm blew over? So we do recommend you drop in and see them. It's 8:25. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number for reaching our program today is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And my email address is bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. Government's an interesting thing. We had a caller, and he's mentioned it a couple of times on the air. He mentioned it again yesterday, and he's mentioned it before. When it comes to government, and he mentions Romans 13, which, if you're a Christian, says you follow authority, and that worldly authority is acting, in a sense, almost in imitation of heavenly authority. That's actually a very strong belief, for instance, in the Roman Catholic Church. We're urged, by the way, to follow the elected leaders because it's believed, or even our princes or kings, because it's believed that they were ordained by God. At least that was the old notion of all of that throughout Europe at one time. However, you've got to realize the next chapter, Romans 14, says if that authority pushes you to do something that is sinful, then that authority itself, if it's coercing you, then that authority itself is sinful. Therefore, if it's sinful, you do not follow it, because if you follow it, it will take you straight to hell. And we understand that we are living in these times right now where we're dealing with all of that. That we have people in government. Look, if you don't bake a cake for a same-sex wedding, they'll put you out of business. They may even throw you in jail if you don't take a picture for a same-sex wedding because of your beliefs. They may do the very same thing. And this is the frightening aspect of living in this country today, and the fact that the American left is trying to imprint its idea of what life should be like on all of us, even when it runs counter to our traditional beliefs. 827, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is what I was mentioning earlier. Hillary Clinton's team of aides and lawyers deleted emails from her private server using a software program intended to prevent recovery and hide traces of her deleted files. This comes from the Daily Caller. South Carolina Representative Trey Gowdy, who, by the way, is back to a bad haircut and now he's growing a beard, revealed the information during an interview on Thursday on Fox News. Gowdy said that Clinton's team used open-source software called BleachBit to remove tens of thousands of emails from her server. This is actually a product. It's called BleachBit. Now, when she said, do you mean did I use a cloth when she was trying to, make light of wiping her server? Now, when in light of the fact that the program is called BleachBit, you actually can see she thought she was trying to be clever. The Clinton team's use of BleachBit suggests nefarious motives, Gowdy suggested. And here's the quote. If she considered them to be personal, then she and her lawyers had those emails deleted. They didn't just push the delete button. They had them deleted so even God couldn't read them. That's from Trey Gowdy speaking to Fox News about this situation. And his point being, if you went to that effort to permanently rid these things from your server, then it was about more than your yoga classes and about more than pictures of your grandchildren. This was about an effort to try and hide the relationship between the State Department and all of those criminal oligarchs from around the world that are funding Hillary Clinton's foundation and will expect, come January 20th, that she turn around and do the bidding of those organizations. Hey, I want to mention quickly, we've got a break coming up in just a moment. Two things. First of all, Forrest Anderson is going to be joining us from Washington Street Pond just after 9 o'clock this morning. We're going to be talking firearms training, and firearms safety once again. And we look forward to talking to him in just a few minutes. I also want to point out, coming up on September 8th on the program, Dr. Christine Pickup is going to pay us a visit. She's a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And she'd like you to remember that with advances in healthcare, people obviously are living longer and sometimes healthier lives. But cognitive decline still is an issue. People with hearing loss have a much greater risk of developing that decline, which can lead to dementia. The greater the loss, the greater the risk. Keeping your hearing healthy is an important part of overall wellness. Knowing your hearing status and doing something about it can lead to a better, healthier life as you age. Now's the time, she reminds you, to schedule a hearing evaluation today. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for an appointment. Telephone number 312-0957. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. A big question this week among some of the media types is Donald Trump abandoning his earlier proposals when it comes to illegal immigrants in this country. I'm going to talk about a little of that in just a few minutes. Almost to our weekend. Just a quick note, next week I am going to be filling in for Benito Baeza as well. on AM Idaho, plus doing Top Story. And then a week from today, we're also going to be at the county fair in Filer between 5 and 7 p.m. And we'll be there because we're going to be broadcasting at the tent or the booth from the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Several of our candidates, state candidates and local candidates, will be dropping in and visiting with us. And if you drop by, you might get a chance to talk with them personally as well. Right now, it's 53. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. As I reminded you earlier and throughout the week, I attended the grand opening of the Last Stand Survival Shop in Jerome last Saturday, and they have actually been having grand opening specials all week long, but they've got gunsmiths on site. And we brought this up the other day that these people, they're experts in this, and they're fashioning firearms customized to your own personal needs. And they'll find out what those needs are. They'll ask a lot of questions, and then from there, they'll go ahead and they'll build exactly what you need to your specifications. And I've been reminding people, too, as well. And because things in this country seem so tenuous lately, I had someone mention to me online last night that they think we're really near the end days, the end times. If that is the case, are you ready? And that's why these people at the Last Stand Survival Shop in Jerome at 18 Butte Drive will also help you prepare a bug-out bag, because you may need it, and it may be that bag is what keeps you alive while you're on the run or you're in hiding for several days or even weeks or months until things finally calm down. So you got to drop in. You got to see them. They're also on Facebook. That is Last Stand Survival Shop, located at 18 Butte Drive in Jerome. A couple of other quick notes today while we're on this subject of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, if I could. I've been reading a lot that Trump, especially the people among the Republicans who didn't like him in the first place, are now saying that Trump is selling his supporters down the river by softening his stance on illegal immigration and becoming more and more like low energy, as Trump called him, Jeb Bush. Do you believe that? Because the last 2 days driving home, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh's program, and Limbaugh was saying something to the effect of, well, Trump's supporters don't really care. Media thinks that they will, but Trump's supporters on the overall know that Trump is behind them and they're for him because they can't stand the alternative. Do you believe that? Or is he selling you down the river now that he actually needs to try to get some votes from some of the minority groups in this country? Our telephone number is 736-0300, 736-03. It wouldn't be the first time in my life that a politician disappointed me. It might not be the second, third, fourth, or fifth time. It's happened a lot, and I think that we're all aware that these people are under some pressure sometimes, and unfortunately those pressures come from corners like the media, and even the toughest guys sometimes crumble, and they wilt in the heat of summer, if you will. This is a writer by the name of Donald Lambro at the Washington Times. Immigration is not the top problem, so he doesn't believe this is going to hurt Trump. He says that, yes, while Americans are concerned about illegal immigration, he says there are several other issues that are important to voters. Number one being the economy, the overall health of the economy, as well as, and this one surprised me, national debt. We have 837, and we have a caller, too, as well, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm regarding what you're just speaking about, whether believing Trump or not. I'm on the fence. I'm off the fence. I'm back on it. I just don't know what to think about that man. And I was hoping when he started that this was going to be the right deal, but well, he throws me off the fence every now and then, so I'm still waiting to see what's going to happen.
I've never found, though, a candidate that I was in 100% agreement with. The only person that would be is if I decided to run myself. And number two, I keep in mind that, nobody's perfect. And so I guess I have to weigh Trump's latest versus all the other factors, Hillary Clinton, economy, who I think would do best overall, even though sometimes I think that you're spot on. He gets my blood boiling and the steam comes out of my ears.
Amen. I hear it.
Well,
may I make another comment of what you were speaking about earlier with the mafia in the Ukraine?
Sure.
I had first-hand experience. I went to Odessa and Kiev in 1995 and then again in 2001. And the thing we found was that the country was run by the mafia. There were lots of Mercedes-Benz and this and that. In Odessa, we ran into a Tex-Mex restaurant, and a young man was from Dallas in partnership with a Ukrainian guy, and they could have whatever they wanted as long as they gave 20% off the top. And yeah, and so then the other thing we found is that all of a sudden out in the countryside, we'd see these like half tankers, like the old country gasoline trucks, and there'd be cars just pulling up left and right, and then all of a sudden, within a few minutes, they were gone. But what they were doing was bootlegging milk. And so people would come with all kinds of containers and buckets and whatever and load up and then take off. And then the other thing we saw was they were selling gasoline, which they call benzene. And they'd taken the back seats and out of their cars and trunks and loaded up with all these Army gas cans and filling up with benzene and taking it home and hiding it, hoarding it. So everything was on the black market. It was really very interesting, but also very sad.
I've got to let you run. I've got a hard break, but those people could be running our country soon. Thank you.